Tinfoil hat on my head, don't worship Saturn, but I hold the lead. Try to unwind you from the spell. If you break the matrix, you escape to hell. Well, he back to sleep again, so much for reaching him. The lust is creeping and can't master the program. Nobody beating him, see what's unseen so we can defeat evil men. Watching planes fly high on the balcony, chemical warfare in the air from the alchemy. To them in this CP, I'm like a bug. Vampires rule the world, Red Cross needs blood.
Stop Islam and to maintain the independence as far as he could of his native Wallachia. He wanted to be ruler.
His brother really accepted the Turkish way of life. He wasn't interested in war. Radu was not. He was interested in just being a prince and being pampered and leading the easy life. For Vlad, that was unthinkable. He had a fight, he had a motive, he was driven, and this was not something he could accept. So the relationship between him and his brother was terrible.
To Vlad, Radu was a traitor, never to be trusted again. In 1448, Vlad's father was murdered by the power-hungry Wallachian nobility in a plot to take the throne. After 6 long years in exile, Vlad's chance to rule had finally come. The Turks raised their army and put Vlad at the helm. He was to be the Sultan's new prince of Wallachia. But within 3 years, Vlad had turned on the Sultan and had thrown him out of what was now his realm. Barely 25 years old, Prince Vlad Dracula began his infamous and bloody reign.
He came back to a country that was unstable. He had no idea who was for him, who was against him, who would help him, who would defy him.
At first it appears he was a popular ruler because he seemed to be independent, which was something they hadn't seen in a long time.
Once in power, Prince Vlad increased security by building thick battlements, watchtowers, and underground tunnels.
Vlad Tepes really changed the way Wallachia looked by building a whole set of new fortresses, of using new key points that he reinforced.
He knew he was on the brink of war with the Turks, that was clear. He was preparing then his country.
To the new prince, Wallachia was now a war state. Once prevention of foreign attack was completed, he turned to ensuring the loyalty of the nobility.
He assembles all the boyars, the nobles, to a great feast. And he wined and dined them. And ironically asked them how many rulers they had seen in their lifetime. And some of them mentioned 12, I mean, a large number of princes who had been on that throne. And what did this show to him? That they had no respect for the prince. And then afterwards, when they little suspected it, he had the place surrounded. He took them on a death march to his mountain lair, Castle Dracula at Koyunnar.
And made them work, side by side, elbow to elbow with the peasants, to rebuild and reinforce the Koyunnar castle.
And many of them fell from the rock, it's a 1,000-foot drop on all sides. It's a precarious sort of place. Many died from exhaustion and from lack of proper nourishment. But soon turned from being, let's say, a man who was apparently at first relatively popular to someone who was feared.
To ensure absolute loyalty, Prince Vlad employed a terror tactic he witnessed as a boy in Adrianople: impalement.
The classic way of impaling is to take the victim, put them spread eagle on the ground, tie the arms to one set of horses and the legs to another. Then you take a stake. What happens is the horses move slowly forwards, then the ropes are cut, and then you're hoisted up on this stake or pole. You die very slowly. Not from your innards being pierced, but from exposure to the elements generally. Purpose, a lasting example of what can happen to you if you disobey the rules. It's effective.
With his ancestral throne secure, Vlad would restructure the social hierarchy and install a strict moral code that would result in the slaughter of thousands of his own people. Having established himself as sole sovereign, and with his court cleansed of disloyal noblemen, Vlad turned to restructuring the gentry, to create a new nobility, loyal only to him.
He got rid of most of the old gentry. There's a noticeable drop in the old families during his reign. What did he do? He replaced them with lower gentry, who would be beholden to him, and more loyal, more trustworthy. And those are the ones he used to carry out his terror tactics of impalement.
With his henchmen in place, Vlad's obsession with loyalty and control led him to install a severe moral code, punishable only by death.
He was an extreme law and order man, and all the chronicles testify. During his lifetime, there was law and order in Wallachia. He would punish you by impalement for little offenses, as well as big ones. If a woman committed adultery, he had her body skinned and then exposed on the village square as a lesson to adulterous wives. Or if a woman was lazy, he'd have her hands cut off and impaled on the village square as a lesson to lazy wives. And he impaled the old people and the children because they were useless.
Naturally, the fear of his wrath kept rebellion down to a minimum. According to peasant tradition, Vlad placed a priceless gold cup in every village square for all the peasantry to admire. Many drank from it, but no one dared steal it. The cup remained in the square throughout Vlad's entire reign as a symbol of his absolute power.
What he wanted to do was to establish the fact that he was the absolute ruler, and what better absolute ruler is it than to be godlike? That's what it's all about. God has the power of life and death, and it's indiscriminate, let's face it. That's the essence of terror.
Before long, execution was not only administered as a punishment, but became the prince's favorite pastime. Vlad would kill at a whim.
Vlad liked to dine amid his impaled victims in his local city, and the stench must have been unbearable throughout the place. He would have the blood gathered in bowls in front of him, and he took bread, dipped it in the blood of his victims, and slurped it down. In one case, a Polish nobleman held his nose. He was there, having dinner with Vlad. And Vlad turned to him and said, "What's the matter with you?" And the fellow said, "My lord, I can't stand the stench of these rotting corpses all around." He said, "Very well, I'll take care of that." And then he had this fellow impaled on a higher stake than the others, and he said, "Well, now he's up there where the gentle breezes blow, and he doesn't have to worry about the stench down here anymore."
People always gathered to watch a public execution, so when he did that, he had it refined to a point of perfection.
This perverted approach to law and order took the lives of thousands of his fellow Christian citizens and turned the royal capital into a stinking graveyard.
Vlad's palace at T.V.D was surrounded by a high hedge 3 miles in length. There was a corpse hanging from every branch, and as soon as somebody came and cut down a corpse, a fresh corpse was put there in its place. And that is one of the reasons why, indeed, in Turkish, Vlad has the title Kazakh Vlad, or Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad was an Orthodox Christian with a growing reputation as a sadist and a monstrous appetite for revenge. But as long as he fought against the Ottoman Turks, he was accepted in the Catholic center of Christendom.
Vlad Dracula was the one who fought and tried to stop the spread of Islam into his own area. And he was supported by the Pope. The Orthodox signed with the Catholics, and they formed one church on paper. which shows you that the theological differences were peanuts. It didn't mean anything to the Pope. This guy was Orthodox Christian. Who cares? He's fighting the Turks.
In 1462, the Sultan Mehmed was on the warpath. The Wallachian border was lined with Vlad and his army, determined to keep the Turkish enemy out.
Mehmed's army was much bigger than Vlad's and much better equipped with cannon and a huge amount of cavalry. The first obstacle that he encountered was, of course, the river Danube, with Vlad drawn up on the northern bank, just ready to chop his army to pieces as it scrambled up the banks. They advanced slowly and drove Vlad back using their guns. They lost 250 men in this operation.
The Sultan sent 2 ambassadors to see Vlad, to negotiate possible settlement. Vlad asked them to remove their caps in his presence, and they said, "Lord, it is our custom never to bare our heads to any person." He said, "Very well, I will confirm you in your custom." So he had his soldiers come out, and they took very small nails, and they nailed these caps to the heads of these ambassadors. And then Vlad said, "When you come to visit a great ruler such as myself, you better go along with my customs. Go back and tell the Sultan what you have seen." And they did. And the Sultan was enraged and wanted vengeance.
With an army 3 times the size of Vlad's, the Sultan advanced and forced Vlad into retreat.
Vlad wheeled his forces around, started destroying everything in his path, marched across the Danube and destroyed villages on both sides of the Danube, which means he destroyed his own Romanian villages too.
Vlad burned food stores and poisoned wells to slow the invading army.
Scorched earth. Brilliant policy. Very, very, very cruel. But they say an army travels on its stomach. This was especially true in the 15th century. They lived off the land. Well, if you create scorched earth, there's no food around.
Vlad the Impaler raced back to the capital and with sadistic delight watched the invading army approach.
A first wave of Turkish came through, crossed the border, and it came into Romania. He won that battle, took all the corpses and the wounded and the prisoners, and had a whole forest of sticks brought up in this big open field. When the second wave came with the main army, they just stopped dead on their tracks. And so this forest of bleeding, agonizing bodies on sticks, and it was just a huge forest of dead bodies.
20,000, over 23,000 some odd. It was a deliberate attempt to frighten the Sultan. And when the Sultan saw this, he said, "What can you do against a man who does such terrible things?"
It was just so barbarious, so atrocious that even for them, they couldn't stand it. They just turned around and fled.
His brother Radu was the only man ambitious enough to cross this barricade of death and follow the Impaler Prince all the way to his mountain retreat.
Sultan sent a small contingent on ahead to pursue Vlad to Castle Dracula, Poyanar.
Led, of course, somewhere from behind probably by his little brother. He had been promised by the Turks that he would be the ruling prince of Romania once they defeated his older brother.
He was trapped at this Castle Dracula. I mean, he was no longer capable of mounting any campaign against the Turks, and they besieged the place, and Vlad then escaped with the help of some gypsies, actually, through a tunnel, and had his horses shod backwards, shoes backwards to confuse pursuit, and escaped over Figarash into Transylvania. Amazing.
Vlad the Impaler had repelled the massive Turkish army and escaped, outwitting his brother Radu, only to be captured by his other enemy, the Hungarian king. Vlad's blood-stained throne was filled by his hated brother.
When they got rid of Dracula, they put this puppet on the throne, Radu the Handsome, who was, after all, a native Wallachian, okay, but he was also a pawn of the Turks.
Almost 12 years after his capture, Vlad was released. With the Hungarian borders under threat from the advancing Turks, Vlad united with the king in the fight against the common enemy. Vlad was finally on his way home. Soon after Radu's death in 1475, Vlad the Impaler reclaimed his place as Prince of Wallachia. Still mourning the bloodbath of his past atrocities, the citizens could only see death and destruction in their future. Within 2 months of his ill-fated reign, Vlad's decapitated body was found in a murky bog, just miles from the capital. According to peasant tradition, in the final battle against his Turkish enemy, Vlad was murdered by the Sultan's hired assassin.
His head was cut off, encased in honey to keep it in good shape, and sent to the Sultan as proof that Kaziklo Voyevoda, the impaling prince, was finally dead.
Vlad's severed head was presented on a high stake for the crowd to witness that the great impaler had himself been impaled. As the bloodthirsty murderer of some 100,000 people, Vlad the Impaler would be immortalized as the infamous vampire Dracula, whose legend continues to evoke fear in the hearts of all.
The House of Draculesti, if you follow them over the years, from before the 13 and 1400s, like the reign of Vlad the Impaler, before that and after that, you see how they slowly change their names. And for instance, that SD on the end of Draculesti, ESTI, they were also using ESTE. And oddly enough, I guess you could just say I'm using my imagination. One of the Saturnian bloodlines is called the House of Este, E-S-T-E, Draculesti. Yeah, seems like they decided to take off the Dracul and just roll with the Este for now. They'll see what happens later. I'm sure they'll go back to it. And obviously, because these same black nobility, Illuminati families, the hidden hand, these bloodlines that we speak about, the bloodline of Dracula ties into some of these families. And these are the ones that own Hollywood. These are the ones that gave us the vampire and zombie stuff in movies. The guy that played in one of the original Dracula movies, his real name was Shrek. And outside the movie Shrek, you know who else's last name is Shrek? Head in the Church of Satan. Guy that's married to Antoine LaVey, the creator of the Church of Satan's daughter. His name is Shrek. It's a small world after all. The Vlads. History repeats itself, it seems. Or his story repeats itself. This one makes all the sense in the world, right? Hugh Hefner. How else would you get away with, in America, having basically a brothel? All the Hollywood stars, everyone attached to them, able to go there and do whatever they do in these underground dungeons, is what I think they even called them in that show. Now, just looking at his face, it's always something in the nose with these guys that literally they have the same nose almost as Vlad. Just like Robert Pattinson, the one that plays the vampire in the movies. They probably even said it on mainstream platforms over and over again that he is related to that same bloodline. The Bushes tie into that bloodline. Used to be called Talisman. Again, you could see it right in the nose. There's obviously way too many to count as far as artists in the music industry, that the mainstream music industry, that push almost like Dracula worship, or just that worship and energy of vampires and witches, like Dracula tribute songs. Why does he wear the rose? Well, why? I think he wears the rose because he's symbolizing he comes from the black nobility families, one of the top ones, if not the top. House of Orsini, blended in with the what they call House of Rosenberg. You know, Eminem's handler, Paul Rosenberg. Why Charles wears that is because it's signalizing Orsini, because here if you look at the Orsini's coat of arms, is that same red rose, which it has the pentagram, the star that we see in so many corporations and flags. Gotha can translate to God, so they're basically trying to say House of God. Old High German, the word God translates to Gott, G-O-T. Game of Thrones, G-O-T. You dig deeper to the real origins, Sanskrit, the word Huda means invoked, to call, invoke, divine, summoned to a sacrifice. Charles, Prince of Wales, they tell you he is from Dracula's bloodline. No questions asked.
And His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who can trace his ancestry back to Romania's dark and distant past.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, you see.
The Impaler, you see.
So I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
This is how, through all these name changes, the coat of arms, and of course corporate logos, but the coat of arms is a big way of them signaling to who they really are. The Orsini, Rosenbergs merged into that name at some point. Schwarzenberg, the Pope's name has Berg in it. The director of NATO's name has Berg in it. The one that runs Facebook name has Berg in it. The one that runs DuckDuckGo, his name has Berg in it. And that's just a couple off the top. On the Hollywood side of it, you got Wahlberg. Of course, Tom Cruise. WAHL. That's interesting though, because Walmart, Wall is in there, but there's a brand in Walmart called Wall, and it's WAHL. Wall Street. If you're on the East Coast, Wall Bombs. Probably anywhere. Walgreens. Check that symbol. Stirring the witch's brew with the W right in the center. Pharmakia literally means sorcery. I like to call them ancient alchemists. At the least, they're alchemists with a dark agenda for mankind. They use alchemy, not for good. We call it medicine, is one of the ways they're using alchemy. That name medicine sounds a lot like the House of Medici, with the N-E at the end of the word Medici. Medicine, Medici. See where some of these words come from. A lot of it comes from these families. And the wordplay of their name is hidden in, can't even say the word, you know, hidden in words that sound like Cyrus, but starts with the V. They name those after themselves sometimes. So in this W for Walgreens, they're using alchemy. I mean, in this symbol, they show you a Capricorn of the zodiac in there as well. Looks like a 7 and a 6. It's also a symbol in alchemy. So it's part of what alchemy is, transformation. So through the transformation of the symbol, there's obviously a 6 in there, but that's exactly what alchemy is, the knowledge and understanding of transformation, transcendence. And that symbol we're looking at, like I said, it's not just a W. It's another way for them to signify Baphomet also, the goat, whatever term you want to use, referring to the same thing. That's how they move. This etymology, this is a pretty light way of searching etymology, the root meanings of words. You'll have to dig a lot deeper usually, but some words will come on here and show you the true meanings, but it's missing a lot of stuff, so you got to dig deep. But if you just do a simple type on wall, W-A-H-L, like I was saying, Wahlberg and other surnames that are attached to this name, and that brand inside of Walmart is W-A-H-L. It pops up Wallach, and it's of course tied into Wallachia, where Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, is from, and where that you see the wordplay in that name Wall all over the place. But this is again another example of how and why it ties in. But Wall means foreigner, and that's interesting because these are the ones that conquer from land to land, and the etymology on the word is foreigner. Another way they use Wall, W-A-L, forms all parts of, I'll only read off the names attached, but interesting. Arnold, Reynold, Ronald. This word right here looks like a name that's pretty familiar for a guy online. Vladimir, Walter. Latin, valere, be strong. Obviously, wall, strong. Get that one. Be well, be worth. Old Church, Slavonic. Vlasti, to rule over, to have power. There we go. That's when you get into the true meaning of what wall really means. Not just a wall, building a wall, Donald Trump. Even though, of course, there is something to that. That ties into that name there. And like it shows up there that forms the word Donald and the word Vladimir. Names that are attached to it. Old Norse, it means ruler. High German, Walt. So when you're saying Walt Disney, in other words, you're saying wall in this context here. That's why they chose the name. Not because of a Sam Walton. Get out of here with that. And that word wall, in dealing with Walmart, some might say it's a stretch, but when thinking in terms of how they approach us, a lot of stuff is in reverse or backwards. So wall is law in reverse, martial law. The word Walmart, or words Walmart, is a scramble of martial law. And when talking about Dracula, endless amount of coincidences is what I'm adding up, right? Or am I showing you why you're seeing the same word attached to so many different things? They've already figured out how to transcend soul consciousness, to keep living on and on and on in a different body, keep coming back. There's this show that they put out, it makes me think even further that when they come back into a different body, they also keep their wealth and their companies, everything they've accumulated throughout their past life. They're just literally coming back to the same life, they're just in a different shell. Just like the vampire movie with Johnny Depp, he plays a count named Collins. Same scenario. Comes back and they settle him in to his old life. Over and over again, coming back, and they come back to their wealth, they come back to their castle, their companies, all the material things that they've accumulated. Again, this is out of Egypt, and the Egypt worship is obviously pretty evident in the music industry. They all worship Egypt. That's why they're showing the pyramids, and even Madonna, Egyptian worship, Lady Gaga, all of them. Not to go off topic, but that's what I think about that situation. These are actual souls of these old myths and stories, which are real things that happen and real people. They're coming back over and over and over again. Immortal. Instantly already have, with their program is different from us. These bloodlines, you could consider a family or a bloodline, a program, right? In a simulation, each family is a different program, but when you have these main families that control the world, that's why they keep it, they try to keep it in the blood, and they all sleep with each other. Incest, the royal families, because it's a program that they're trying to preserve. The way to look at it. Now, have you ever asked this? You know, the blood donation, Red Cross, Red Shield, donating blood. Rothschild, which they tie in. They have been under several different names over the centuries also to hide who they are. But that's the known name we know for them now is Rothschild. The ancient name is Bacharach. Rothschild in German is Red Shield. So Red Cross, Red Shield should make you question who you're donating your money to and who you're donating your blood. You're donating your blood and your money to these draconian bloodlines that control the monopoly game we call life. So we're giving it right back to them in more ways than one. Outside of blood rituals and the fact that they need that blood to stay alive, maybe they need it because a cloned body would still need blood flowing through its veins, just like in a computer. All those wires, there's electricity, light flowing through its wires. There's a show they have called Altered Carbon, and it's like not even far in the first or the second episode. They actually show you, and it backs up what I'm saying right here, is as far as these bloodlines being a program, and they're immortal. Every time they die off in their current body, they come right back in a different body. They've showed us tons of movies about that too, being able to transfer their soul to another body. But in Altered Carbon, they actually tell you how they come back to all their wealth and their whole same life. And that idea is not new. Like I said, Hollywood's shown us tons of movies about that. But what I'm telling you is this is something real, and it's something that they're doing. No, it's interesting though, because in America we have our Hollywood stars, and then the highest level of them that are actually right from these Saturnian bloodlines, plants under different names. And that, I know that's just so normal in Hollywood, because they go under their actor name and usually it's not a real name. Wonder why. It's like all the countries are in lockstep as far as the programming that they give. I know it varies and it's tougher here, and maybe China. I know the program is different, but as far as the Hollywood aspect of it and the music, I don't think it's much different. Even in China, all these other countries, they still push the same agendas in the movies. It's still vampire movies, zombies, and it's the same dark satanic symbolism. Not saying I understand that these symbols can also be used for things that are not satanic, but the occult side of it is what I'm exposing in my videos. Now the witchcraft side of it, the spell casting, and the things you should be aware of to, kind of keep that lock on your mind, because that's what they want. Only you got the key to that. Everything they do is just trying to figure out how to get that key from you. But awareness, I believe, is how they'll never find that key, because you know how the game works. But isn't that funny though, to go back real quick to the blood, just to add one more thing. Those families, and they hate the sheeple, the people, the regular people, the ones that built the world for them. Especially with germs, they hate us. We're just germs running around. But isn't that strange? They're quick to snatch up clean blood from you and even pay you for it. That should raise a question. And to bring the topic back into the vampire things, the word count, they obviously call quite a few beings that are still alive nowadays, that's still a title, count. But where the original term count came from is when they were doing blood experiments and rituals to people. Like a countess counts blood pints in your body. And just like most of the English language that was created by these people. And it's funny actually by saying that when people argue over how you pronounce a word in English. That's not the right way, this is the right way. My way is the right way. Wrong. All this stuff was created out of Germanic and all the other original languages created as a hex, with most of the words, not all of them. Depends on how you use them and how you're aware of what you're saying. But of course, count is an example, because there's quite a few different counts, means a lot of different things. And that's how they've hidden all the true meanings. Start to see where some of these words and terms come from. Cannibal's another one. Of course, it's the word Cain and Abel mixed together. Cannibal. Also, in the book of Enoch, chapter 7, you start from verse 4. It says, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. So even in the old writings, they're letting you know that this is not new. It's something that they've been doing over and over. And what does Saturn do? Devours. That verse, you could see where at some point in time they've programmed humans to eat other animals. But at the end of the day, anything that's alive and conscious in whatever shell you're in, got eyes, brain, heart, a lot of the same things we got. A dream. I myself have dogs. Obviously, you know, animals have dreams. I see my dogs dreaming all the time. Now, how does that make sense? That they haven't even had close to the life experiences that one would have as a human. But yet, I could watch my dog dream or just look his way and see him kicking, running. How is that happening? Is he really just dreaming about things that are going around the house, in the yard, and on walks and ventures, stuff like that? Or is it because, like I said before, sleep and peels is the same word in reverse? So when you're sleeping, you're peeling through the layers of existence, or you're connecting back to who you really are. And that makes more sense with why would animals would even have such vivid dreams like that. I mean, you could see eyes twitching, and that's just with the dog. That's just one example. That being said, they're conscious just like us, and they're here having that experience. They have a brain, memories, a lot of the same things we do, just in a different shell. Part of the soul trap is, part of Satan's trick is eating each other. Maybe different level of awareness, but it's still, you can consider that cannibalism. You're still eating the flesh of something that was alive, a live being, not something that was growing naturally, fruits and vegetables, things like that, that are like coded into the earth. When you put a seed in, it knows what to do with it. But of course, nowadays, was once even natural, growing from the earth, has been genetically modified, and random places can just pop up edible plants and vegetables, fruit. Again, going way back to the Book of Enoch, it's showing you how they eventually started turning humans into cannibals. Whenever you or your body goes through an experience, there's obviously memory attached to that, but there's also vibrations from the energy of the way you were feeling at the time when that happened. So that's why they've tricked us into eating animals and other beautiful things in nature that it really should just be here peacefully enjoying their life here, instead of being tortured, and all that is energy transfer. And we don't see the process behind how it happens, or probably don't care because it tastes good. You can't put yourself in the mind frame to really think behind the eyes of whatever it was that happened to put that burger, hot dog, chicken wing, legs. Like, what are we doing? The intelligent design behind this world we live in, regardless if it's inside of a cube or a computer. The original intent of it, I think, was for good, and to let souls be able to come here and experience life in their body, to learn and grow, not to get caught in a trap of dark energy and be able to keep you trapped forever in a loop. Is it Vladimir Putin? That's Vlad the Impaler reincarnated? I know Putin's not his real name. You can't even, past a grandfather or so, you can't find much heritage on that Putin name. I've said this in another video, the Satelliters video, that I think Putin's middle name is where you could trace his last name. His middle name, come on, man. They're saying his name is Vladimirovich Putin. They've been rulers and czars. That name goes way back. And again, Putin, Pu, in alchemy terms, stands for plutonium. And, you know, the first 2 or 3 things, the chemicals made up in what they call a nuclear weapon, a bomb, is plutonium and uranium. And then, of course, they use tin. So I think it's a stage name, Putin. And look back on Putin's side. His middle name is his last name, Vladimirovich. This guy, Grand Duke Vladimirovich of Russia, born in the 1876, passed in 1938. We'll go down to his spouse, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. That's the House of Windsor. That's the house, that's the royal bloodline of the Queen and the current king now. And through the symbolism I've showed, that house there happens to use the same symbol in their coat of arms as the Orsinis, the House of Orsini, the pentagram, the star and the rose, signaling Rosicrucians. So if Putin's real name is Vladimirovich, and he came from that same Vladimirovich I showed you, then there's a link right there tying Putin in to the House of Windsor, Saxe, Coburg, Gotha, the Bergs, whatever you want to call it. Tying together some of these names though, and seeing some of these marriages, which it's just seeing this big witch's brew of all these families in the same pot, all connected together. If Volodymyr Zelensky is attached to this Zelensky, the House of Zelensky, it's a Polish, basically a royal family. Coat of arms is the bull, just like the Vatican. The House of Borgia has the bull in their coat of arms. They also got counts. It says the Zelensky family has been actors in the history of Poland since the 11th century. In 1801, the Zelensky family, wow. In 1801, the Zelensky family nobility was recognized by the Habsburg. I'm sure that name sounds familiar. The Habsburgs. Through the Habsburgs is one of the names that ties into the Saxe, Coburg, Gotha.